Hello again. Another video talking about guitar component parts, and today I want to talk about this thing, the nut. Now, it doesn't look particularly big or important, but it actually is a key component in the guitar. It's got two main jobs to do, and they're actually slightly kind of a conflict with each other. So I'll explain what it is that the nut's trying to do. We'll talk a little bit about how to make sure that the nut on your guitar is in the best state it can be, so you get the most out of your guitar. Okay, so let's take a closer look at the nut. You see, basically nuts come in a variety of materials, whether they're bone or plastic or brass, graphite, or some man-made material. But they're all trying to do the same job. Down here, it's effectively a 0 fret, if you like. Now, when you're playing a note on the guitar, you put your finger against the string, squeeze it against the fret, and if you're fretting that note correctly, the note will ring out nice and cleanly. If you don't fret the note so well, if your finger's not on quite so tight, you're not making such a tight squeeze between your finger and the fret, the vibration from the string is not going to go into the guitar the same way, and it'll sound a bit dead. And what the nut is doing down here is acting like a 0 fret, and you're not actually putting your finger on it. What the nut needs to do is hold the string tightly enough that when you play the open string, it rings out nice and cleanly, in the same way that if you were fretting a note, it would ring out nice and cleanly. The open string needs to ring out nice and cleanly as well. That's where the material that the nut's made of is quite important, because different materials have different acoustic properties and have different tones or capabilities for transmitting the vibration from the string into the wood of the guitar neck, and just generally making the sound work on the guitar. So if the guitar is made out of plastic, it'll have one type of sound. If it's made out of material like brass, it'll have a different sound. You'll see bone nuts, they've got a brighter sound. All sorts of different materials. Each one has its own type of sound, but essentially they're doing the same job. They're acting as like a 0 fret for down here at the end of the fingerboard. So that's one job that the nut has to do. The other job is to act as a guide for the strings. So if you take a look at it, you can see we've got the slots cut for the strings, and the strings slide through there and along to the machine heads. So when you tune a guitar string, what you're concerned about is the tension between the 0 fret here down all the way down to the bridge. You want that note there to be in tune. So as well as just giving you the basic string spacing of the nut, what the nut has to be able to do is to allow any adjustments to the machine heads, to the tuning pegs, to change the tension in the string. They need that to be able to move smoothly along here. And the important thing is that the string slides freely through those slots. So this is where it becomes a bit of it's like the two jobs of the nut are sort of fighting each other. In one way, you need a very tight thing here where you're getting a good sort of 0 fret sound, but at the same time we need low friction, so not so much grip, so that when we change the tuning using the tuning peg, the tension moves smoothly along the string. And if you do things like string bending, and this is particularly an issue on electric guitar, where you bend a string, you're changing the tension. If you pull any string through the nut, when you release the bend and you're not squeezing it, the string needs to slide back smoothly over the nut. And there's a couple of things that you can do with a nut like this to make sure that it's in the best possible shape to perform and give you good movement of the strings through the slots. First of all is to make sure that the slots are the right size. When you get your guitar set up properly, one of the things that the luthier will do is make sure that these slots are the right size for the strings. Now if you just look at them casually, you think, well, that's kind of top E sized. That's sort of B string size, that's sort of G string size, that's sort of D size. It all looks kind of right, but when you think about guitar strings, we're talking about something that's measured in thousandths of an inch. So if you're playing with, say, a fairly heavy gauge string, you know, you've had your guitar set up for like a set of nines, where you've got a 9 on the top of each string and the nut's been working fine, and then you go to something heavier, something say like a set of 11s. That's only 2/1000ths of an inch, but there might just be a little bit more friction, especially when you go down to the bass strings, you know, where we're talking about a difference maybe of 5 or 10/1000ths of an inch. Just a tiny difference, but if the string was a little bit snug on the lighter gauge string, if you go to a heavier gauge string, that there's going to be more grip there, and possibly the string's not going to slide so smoothly through the nut. So, important thing when you get the guitar set up is to make sure that these nut slots are cut to the right width for the string, and also to the right height, so that the strings aren't riding too high above the fingerboard. That's the sort of job, unless you've got the experience, is best left to a professional guitar repairer. Let a luthier do that, because he knows just how to cut this. He's got the right tools. If you try this yourself, there's a chance you'll get it wrong, and once you've made a cut and you've taken too much out of the nut, you can't put that back in. You're kind of stuck. So that's the sort of setup job that's best left to a professional. One bit of running repair that you can do to the nut, though, is just to make sure it's adequately lubricated. You can use a couple of things for this. Something like the sewing machine oil, like a light sewing machine oil. There's a brand over in the UK, I don't know if you have it in America, called 3-in-1 oil. It's just a very light mineral oil. Just a tiny little drop in each slot before you put the strings on, and it just keeps the nut slot lubricated, and the strings will move smoothly. Don't use something like WD-40 or a silicone based lubricant. They're just too light. They'll wear off too quickly, and you won't have the effect. An alternative to that is to rub into the slot before you put the strings on. Rub in some graphite from a very soft pencil. If you can get, like, say, 6B pencil, something really soft, just put some graphite in there. That's really, really slippery naturally, and once you put the strings on, that graphite gives you like a smooth, low friction layer contact between the string and the nut, so the string will move smoothly through the nut. Let's take a look at something else. This is my self-build Bitzer, and when I built this, one of the things that I put into it was this nut here, which is made out of graphite. So that's naturally a more smooth nut than the plastic one that we had on the acoustic there. This being graphite, there's less friction for the strings as they go through the slots, so it's a little bit easier to maintain. A nut can make a big difference to the performance of the guitar in terms of the tuning stability, and also in terms of the way it sounds. As I said before, each type of nut material has its own kind of sound, the way that it transfers the sound into the guitar neck. And so if you've got a cheap guitar with just a plastic nut, it might bind up, not be as smooth, not have as good a sound as something, say, like with a bone nut or a graphite nut. So that's just something to bear in mind. The nut material makes a difference. So having a low friction nut helps you over the problem of tuning. The tension in the strings varying, and the string being able to go back to rest, and the tension settling out between each side of the nut, the tuning peg side and the fingerboard side. There's another way that guitar manufacturers have tackled that tuning problem, though, and that's a thing called a locking nut. I'll show you one of those now. Okay, so this is my Thompson custom guitar, and down here is something that looks a little bit more mechanical than what we had on the other guitars. This is what's called a locking nut. This is the sort of thing you find on guitars fitted with locking tremolo systems like this Floyd Rose. What the locking nut does is it seeks to get rid of that problem of friction of the strings of the nut, because what you actually have here are 3 little clamps, and the clamps actually press against the strings. So you take these clamps off, string the guitar up, get it up to tune, put the clamps on, tighten them, and then the string can't move. It is literally fixed there, so there's no friction between the nut and the tuning pegs. The string is literally fixed here and then fixed at the bridge. Made out of metal as well, so you get a nice strong sound. It's good at passing the vibration from the string into the guitar neck. These come in a couple of different guises, some that fit through the top of the fingerboard, like this one. Some of the other Floyd Rose locking nuts actually fit from behind. Personally, I don't like those so much because you've actually got to drill a couple of holes in the back of the headstock where the guitar's neck's inherently quite weak. So if you get an option with a locking nut, always try to get one that's fitted from the top of the guitar rather than from behind. You might come across some of the guitars sort of from the mid to late 80s when locking tremolo systems were just coming onto the market, where the locking nut wasn't actually at the 0 fret, it was actually about here where the string tree is. So there'd be a normal nut at fret 0 and then the locking nut back here. The idea was that the locking nut would get around the tension problem, but there was still a tiny little bit of space where the string could go out of tune, so it wasn't ideal. Having a locking nut actually at fret 0 like this, much better. Okay, so hopefully that's explained to you what the guitar nut is, what it's for, and a couple of tips there about being able to maintain your normal, regular slotted nut to make sure you get good performance out of it in terms of tuning stability. Being able to have the nut slots cut to the right size and shape, right height, and a bit of pencil lead or oil in there, just a tiny little bit of oil, just to keep the strings moving smoothly. Okay, hope you found that useful. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in another video soon. Bye for now.